May 17th, 1943. A freight train crosses the cornfields of northern Iowa, carrying human cargo captured 8,000 kilometers away in the deserts of Tunisia. Inside the sealed cars, 247 German soldiers from the Afrika Korps breathe the humid air of a country they were taught to see as decadent and weak. They don't know yet that what awaits them will be more unsettling than any battlefield. Abundance. Camp Algona. A prisoner of war facility built in 6 months on Iowa farmland. Capacity, 10,000 men. Security perimeter, 3 kilometers. Daily ration per prisoner, according to the Geneva Convention, 3,000 calories minimum, for men who spent months eating canned sardines and stale bread in the African desert. This number means nothing yet. Soon, it will mean everything. Among them is Sergeant Karl Weiss, 26 years old, mechanical engineer 10th Panzer Division, captured May 12th near Tunis, after his unit ran out of ammunition, fuel and food, in that order. For Karl, the war ended not with a bang, but with the slow realization that his stomach had begun consuming itself. His first diary entry, written in pencil on scrap paper. They separated us by rank. The Americans are methodical. Everything is counted, recorded, filed, even us, especially us. I wonder if they count the calories they say they'll give us, or if it's just another lie to keep us docile. 6 p.m. The prisoners are led to the mess hall. Lieutenant John R. Wallace, supply officer, supervises the distribution. His daily report, filed May 17, 1943, states, standard ration served, beef stew, white bread with butter, canned peaches, coffee with sugar and condensed milk. No incidents during distribution. What Wallace's report doesn't mention are the faces. Karl Weiss stares at his tray as if it were a hallucination. 8 ounces of beef stew, swimming in gravy. 2 thick slices of white bread. A pat of butter, wrapped in waxed paper. Half a can of peaches in syrup. Hot coffee, real coffee, with sugar. I thought it was a trick, a psychological operation. Feed us once, abundantly, then starve us to break our morale. It's what we would have done. Oberleutnant Dieter Fischer, former philosophy professor from Hamburg, sits across from Karl. At 41, he's one of the oldest prisoners in the barracks. He picks up the bread, weighs it in his hand, examines it like an artifact from an alien civilization. This bread, when was it baked? The American guard responds without looking up. This morning. We bake it fresh every day. Every day. The words hang in the air like an obscenity. In the Afrika course, bread came every 3 days, if it came at all. Moldy, hard as stone, rationed by the gram. 17 minutes after the first meal, Private Otto Schmidt vomits violently outside the latrine, then another, then 5 more. Dr. Heinrich Becker, Luftwaffe medical officer and now prisoner physician, takes notes in a confiscated logbook. Acute gastric distress following rapid ingestion of high-fat, high-protein meal. Subjects' digestive systems, adapted to prolonged scarcity, reject sudden abundance. Physiological response consistent with refeeding syndrome. Recommend gradual increase in portions. But the portions don't decrease. The next morning, breakfast arrives. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, jam, milk. The prisoners eat slowly now, cautiously, waiting for the punishment that never comes. That night, Karl can't sleep. Around him, men breathe heavily, their stomachs distended, unaccustomed to being full. Someone is crying softly in the darkness. Another is praying. Karl writes in his diary, I saved half my bread, wrapped it in my shirt. I don't trust this. I don't trust the Americans. I don't trust the food. I don't trust my own hands reaching for seconds. In the desert, we learned that today's plenty is tomorrow's memory. Here, they want us to believe tomorrow exists. I don't believe them yet. But across the barracks, under 23 different bunks, 23 pieces of bread are hidden in shirts, pillowcases and pockets. Butter is concealed in tin cups. Sugar packets disappear into boots. The prisoners of Camp Algona are no longer fighting a war. They're fighting an instinct older than war itself. The fear of hunger's return. Captain Robert Anderson, camp commander, former Chicago lawyer, writes in his nightly report, "Prisoners exhibit hoarding behavior. Expected. Previous camps reported similar patterns. Protocol: maintain consistent meal schedule. Do not reduce portions. Time and repetition will solve this." Time and repetition. The American solution to German trauma. Feed them until they stop believing in scarcity. Feed them until abundance becomes boring. Feed them until they forget what hunger tastes like. Karl Weiss, lying awake with breadcrumbs pressed against his ribs, doesn't know it yet. But the Americans have already begun to win a war he didn't know was being fought. Day 4. The bread still comes. The butter still glistens on metal trays. The coffee still steams in tin cups. Karl Weiss watches the morning routine with the suspicion of a man waiting for a trap to spring. It doesn't spring. In the mess hall, conversations happen in whispers, always in German, always about the same thing. Not the war, not home, not the future, just the food. Did you see the size of the eggs today? Real bacon, not ersatz, real pork. The jam, I think it's strawberry. When did you last taste strawberry? Dieter Fischer sits at the end of a long table, observing. He doesn't eat quickly like the younger men, doesn't hoard like Karl. He chews slowly, methodically, as if each bite were a philosophical problem requiring contemplation. Around him, prisoners still pocket rolls, still wrap butter in handkerchiefs, still act as if tomorrow might bring emptiness. Fischer addresses the table, his professor's voice cutting through the noise. "Gentlemen, a question. What is abundance?" Silence. Someone laughs nervously. "I'm serious. Is abundance having enough, or is it believing you will always have enough? Because I submit to you. We have had enough for 4 days now, and yet we act as if we have nothing." Karl looks up from his tray. "Because we've had enough before, for a day, for a week." And then it ended. "Precisely," Fischer says, pointing his fork like a lecture pointer. "We trust our past more than their present. We are prisoners of our own experience." Private Werner Koch, barely 19, speaks up. "My mother sent a letter. Got it yesterday. She says they're on ration cards now. 200 grams of bread per day. She's eating potato peels." The table goes quiet. Someone sets down their coffee cup too hard. Karl feels the bread in his stomach turn to stone. He's eaten more in 4 days than his mother probably eats in 2 weeks. The guilt arrives not as emotion, but as nausea, familiar and cold. That afternoon, Lieutenant Wallace conducts his weekly inventory. His ledger is immaculate. 2,147 pounds of beef consumed, 1,200 loaves of bread baked, 340 pounds of butter distributed, 180 gallons of milk delivered. The numbers are perfect. The numbers are always perfect. He notices a pattern, though. The garbage bins are fuller than they should be. Not with spoiled food, but with hidden food that rotted in pockets and under mattresses. He makes a note. Hoarding behavior persists. Wastage increasing. Recommends psychological observation. But Wallace doesn't understand what he's seeing. These men aren't wasting food. They're practicing survival. They're rehearsing for the famine they're certain will come. In the barracks, Fischer organizes what he calls evening discussions. 20 men gather on bunks, smoking cigarettes provided by the Red Cross, discussing philosophy as if they were still in a Hamburg cafe and not a prison camp in Iowa. Tonight's topic: the morality of abundance. In Germany, Fischer begins, we spoke of sacrifice, of discipline, of going without so the Reich could endure. We were told that suffering built character, that scarcity made us strong. He gestures toward the mess hall. And now, we are given more than we need. Daily, without effort, without earning it. What does this abundance say about the Americans? Corporal Hans Bauer, a farmer's son from Bavaria, answers, it says they're soft, weak. They don't understand sacrifice. Does it? Fischer challenges. Nor does it say they don't need to understand sacrifice because they've built a system that doesn't require it. What's stronger, a nation that endures scarcity or a nation that has eliminated scarcity? Karl writes in his diary that night, his English improving with each entry. Fischer asks dangerous questions. He makes us think about things we don't want to think about. If the Americans can feed us this much, prisoners, enemies, what are they feeding their own people? What kind of nation has so much that it can afford to give it away to those who tried to kill them? I don't want to admire them, but the numbers don't lie. 3,000 calories every day, like clockwork. By the end of the second week, subtle changes emerge. Some prisoners stop hoarding. They eat their portions and leave the table without pocketing anything. They've begun, unconsciously, to trust the pattern. Others, like Carl, still hide food. But now it's not from fear of tomorrow's hunger. It's from fear of forgetting yesterday's. The bread hidden under his mattress is a memorial, not a reserve. A reminder that abundance is an anomaly, that the natural state of the world is want. Dr. Becker notes in his medical log, digestive systems adapting, vomiting incidence decreased to 0, weight gain average, 2.3 pounds per prisoner, psychological state, conflicted. They're learning to accept the food, but not the implications of the food. Captain Anderson reads Becker's report and underlines one sentence. They're learning to accept the food, but not the implications of the food. He writes in the margin, good, let them learn slowly. We have time. And they do have time. Because the war is far away, and the bread keeps coming, and the butter never runs out, and every morning the coffee is hot and sweet, and impossible to reconcile with everything these men thought they knew about the world. Week 6. Carl Weiss wakes up and realizes he's forgotten to check under his mattress. The bread he hid there 3 days ago, still there. But now he doesn't feel the urge to verify it. The panic that used to grip him each morning, the need to confirm his small reserve existed, has dulled into something closer to indifference. This frightens him more than the hunger ever did. In the mess hall, the morning routine has become exactly that. Routine. Men line up without the desperate urgency of the first weeks. They take their trays, sit, eat, and leave. No one guards their plate anymore. No one watches their neighbor's portions with envious calculation. Lieutenant Wallace notices it too. His weekly report, dated June 28, 1943, behavioral shift observed. Prisoners no longer exhibit anxiety during meal distribution, eating pace normalized, hoarding behavior reduced by approximately 70%. Garbage bins contain significantly less hidden food, system functioning as designed. System functioning as designed. As if human psychology were merely another logistical problem to be solved with consistency and supply chain management. But Wallace isn't entirely wrong. Dieter Fischer addresses the evening group, his tone different now, less professorial, more confessional. Gentlemen, I must admit something. This morning I was offered a second helping of eggs. I refused. Not because I was full, not because I was being polite, but because I simply didn't want them. When did that happen? When did we stop wanting more? The question hangs in the tobacco smoke. Several men shift uncomfortably. I think, says Carl, speaking up for the first time in these discussions, we stopped wanting more when we started believing in tomorrow. Fisher nods slowly. Explain. In the desert, we wanted more because there was no tomorrow. Every meal might be the last. Every calorie was survival. Here tomorrow comes. Every day. The same. So more stops meaning survival. It just means more. Werner Koch, the young private, adds quietly, my grandfather used to say, a rich man is not one who has much, but one who needs little. I thought he was talking about money, but maybe he was talking about this, about believing you'll have enough. Dr. Becker documents the psychological shift in clinical language. Week 6 marks significant behavioral threshold. Subjects demonstrate decreased cortisol response to meal anticipation, hoarding instinct largely extinguished. Subjects now capable of voluntary portion refusal, a behavior impossible in weeks 1 through 4. Conclusion. Trust in system consistency has been established at neurological level, but establishing trust comes with a cost nobody anticipated. Carl receives a letter from his sister in Stuttgart. She writes in careful script, the kind that comes from rationing even the ink. We are managing, don't worry about us. Father's factory was bombed, but he survived. We eat once a day now, sometimes twice if the rations arrive. Mother says to tell you she's proud. We saw photos in the newspaper of prisoner camps in America. They say you're all being treated well. We're glad. At least one of us should eat. Carl reads the letter 3 times. Then he skips dinner. He's not the only one. After mail call, attendance in the mess hall drops by 40 men. They sit in the barracks, holding letters, unable to reconcile the weight in their stomachs with the emptiness described in ink on paper. Fisher finds Carl sitting outside, smoking, staring at nothing. "You didn't eat." "Neither did you." "No," Fisher admits. "I couldn't." My wife wrote. "They're burning furniture for heat, eating bread made from sawdust and chestnuts. And I'm here, complaining that the coffee isn't hot enough." Carl laughs, but it's bitter. "We're learning the wrong lesson, aren't we? We're learning to accept abundance while our families learn to accept starvation. What happens when we go home? Will we even recognize each other?" "I've been thinking about that," Fisher says, "about what this place is really teaching us. It's not just about food, it's about power. The Americans aren't feeding us because they're kind. They're feeding us because they can, because they have so much that feeding 10,000 enemy soldiers is barely an inconvenience. That's the real message, not charity, capacity." That night, Carl writes in his diary, now almost entirely in English. "Today I did something I never thought I would do. I left food on my plate, not because I was sick, not because it was bad, but because I was full. Just full. I sat there, looking at half a piece of bread, and I thought about my mother, and I couldn't eat it, but I also couldn't bring myself to throw it away, so I wrapped it and put it in my pocket, not to save it for later, just because throwing it away felt like a crime against everyone back home who would kill for that bread. I'm not starving anymore, but I'm not free either. I'm trapped between two kinds of hunger, the one I left behind and the one I'm afraid to forget." Captain Anderson observes the shift and writes in his report, "Some prisoners now refusing meals after mail call. Chaplain suggests guilt response. Recommend no intervention. Prisoners must reconcile this on their own. Our job is to maintain consistency. They will adapt, and they do adapt, but not in the way Anderson expects." By week 7, the prisoners develop a new ritual. They eat their portions, all of them, but they do so silently, without enjoyment, almost mechanically. The food is no longer pleasure or survival, it has become duty. They eat because refusing would be wasteful. They eat because the food is there. They eat because their bodies have learned to trust tomorrow, even if their consciences haven't. August 1943. The heat in Iowa is oppressive, humid, nothing like the dry furnace of Tunisia. In the barracks, men lie on their bunks in the afternoon, too hot to move, too well fed to feel the restless energy of hunger. This idleness is its own kind of torture. Carl Weiss has gained 17 pounds. Dr. Becker recorded it during the monthly medical examination. 17 pounds in 12 weeks. His uniform, already loose from the desert months, now fits again. Almost normal. Almost like he was never starving at all. He hates it. Another mail call. Another batch of letters from a Germany that seems more distant with each passing week. Werner Koch receives a letter from his mother. He reads it once, then walks directly to the latrine and vomits. Not from bad food, from good conscience trying to reject what bad conscience has consumed. Fisher gathers the group that evening. Attendance is lower now. Some men have stopped coming, preferring isolation to discussion, preferring not to think too deeply about what's happening to them. "I want to read you something," Fisher begins. He holds a letter, the paper thin and worn. "This is from my colleague in Hamburg, a professor of economics." He writes, "Dieter, we are conducting a great experiment in scarcity. The ration cards give us 1,800 calories per day, in theory. In practice, we receive perhaps 1 to 200. We are all losing weight. The university closed 3 departments. No coal for heat, no paper for books. Yet I find myself more intellectually alive than ever. When you have nothing, every thought becomes precious. When you return, you must tell me, what does abundance do to the mind? Does it sharpen it or dull it?" Fisher folds the letter carefully. "I've been here long enough now to answer him. Abundance doesn't sharpen or dull the mind. It divides it. Half of me knows I should be grateful. The other half knows I should be ashamed, and I can't reconcile the two." Carl speaks, his voice rough. "My sister sent photos. My nephew, 7 years old. I barely recognized him. Thin arms, hollow cheeks. and she writes underneath, "Don't worry, he's healthy, just growing." She's lying to make me feel better. And I'm here, growing fat on American beef. Corporal Bauer adds, "My father wrote that they slaughtered our last pig, the one we were saving for Christmas. They ate it in July because they couldn't afford to feed it anymore. And I'm throwing away bacon because I'm too full to finish it." The guilt metastasizes through the camp like an infection. Men who once fought over second helpings now take smaller first portions. They eat quickly, efficiently, trying not to taste it, trying not to enjoy it. Pleasure has become obscene. Lieutenant Wallace notices the change in his consumption reports. Daily caloric intake per prisoner has dropped from 3,100 to 2,600. Not because supplies have decreased, because the prisoners are refusing them. He brings it to Captain Anderson's attention. "Should we be concerned?" Wallace asks. Anderson reads the report, then sets it down. Psychologically? Yes, practically, no. They're still eating more than they need. Their guilt doesn't change our responsibility. Keep the portions consistent, they'll work through it. But they don't work through it. They marinate in it. Doctor. Becker's medical notes become tinged with something beyond clinical observation. The prisoners are experiencing what I would term abundance trauma. They have adapted physiologically to regular nutrition, but psychologically they remain in a state of wartime scarcity. This creates cognitive dissonance. They know their families are starving. They know they are not. This knowledge sits in the stomach like a stone, heavier than any hunger. Fisher organizes what he calls the accounting. One evening, he brings a notebook to the group. "I've been calculating. Based on the letters we've received, we can estimate average caloric intake in Germany right now. For civilians, approximately 1,400 calories per day. For us, here, 2,600 to 3,000. We eat, on average, twice what our families eat. Let that number sit with you." Someone asks, "Why are you doing this? Why are you making it worse?" Fisher's response is immediate. "Because we need to understand what's happening to us. The Americans aren't just feeding us, they're teaching us. They're showing us what it looks like when a nation has enough, when a system works, when logistics triumph over ideology. Every meal is a lesson in American power. And we're learning, whether we want to or not." Carl writes in his diary that night, his hand shaking slightly, "Fisher is right. This is education, not charity. They're teaching us that everything we believed about strength through sacrifice was a lie. Real strength isn't enduring scarcity. Real strength is building a system that eliminates scarcity. We called them weak, soft, decadent. But they're feeding an army, fighting a war on 2 continents, and still have enough left over to feed us, their enemies, better than we ever fed ourselves. That's not weakness. That's superiority so absolute, it doesn't even need to be cruel." December 1943, the Iowa winter arrives with a vengeance that reminds the prisoners of the Russian front. Snow piling against barracks, wind cutting through layers of wool, breath crystallizing in the frozen air. But inside the mess hall it's warm. Steam rises from hot soup. Fresh bread, still warm from the ovens, sits in enormous baskets. The contrast is so stark it feels like sacrilege. Karl Weiss no longer hides food. His mattress is empty of contraband bread. His pockets contain no emergency reserves. Somewhere between August and December, without noticing the exact moment, he stopped preparing for famine. The transformation happened so gradually that he only recognizes it in retrospect, like watching a photograph develop in chemical baths. The Christmas meal is obscene in its generosity. Roasted turkey, mashed potatoes swimming in butter, cranberry sauce, green beans and rolls of apple pie, real coffee with real cream. The prisoners sit before it like penitents before an altar of excess. No one speaks during the meal. They eat methodically, without joy, fulfilling an obligation they no longer understand. After dinner, Fisher stands to address the hall. Captain Anderson has given permission for a Christmas speech. Fisher holds a piece of paper, but doesn't read from it. "Gentlemen," he begins, his voice carrying across the silent room, 7 months ago, we arrived here as soldiers of the Reich, starving, suspicious, certain that this abundance was temporary, a trick, a weapon of psychological warfare. We hoarded bread under our mattresses. We vomited from eating too much, too fast. We trusted nothing." He pauses. looking around at faces that have filled out, bodies that have healed. Today we ate turkey. Tomorrow we will eat breakfast. The day after, lunch and dinner, and the day after that, the same. We know this now. We have learned to trust the pattern. But in learning to trust abundance, what have we forgotten? What have we lost? The room remains silent. We have lost the ability to go home, Fisher continues. Not physically. One day we will return to Germany. But psychologically, spiritually, we are already foreigners to our own country. We have eaten while they starved. We have been warm while they froze. We have learned that scarcity is not inevitable, that hunger is a choice made by systems, not fate. How do we return to a nation that still believes suffering builds character? How do we look our families in the eye and tell them we forgot what hunger feels like? Werner Koch, now 20, his face no longer gaunt, speaks up. We don't tell them. We lie. We say it was hard. We say we suffered. We never speak of the turkey. Several men nod in agreement, but Fisher shakes his head. No, we don't lie. We tell the truth. We tell them what we learned here. That the war was never about ideology or will or sacrifice. It was about capacity. About who could build a system so efficient, so abundant, that it could feed its enemies better than we fed ourselves. That's the lesson of Camp Algona. That's what we take home. Carl stands and surprising himself. And what do we do with that lesson? Fisher meets his eyes. We rebuild. We rebuild Germany into a place where no one has to choose between bread today and bread tomorrow. Where abundance isn't propaganda, it's infrastructure. Where strength isn't measured in how much we can endure, but in how much we can produce. That night, Carl writes his final entry in the camp diary. Tomorrow we begin rehearsals for the Christmas play. We will perform it using sets made from flour sacks and costumes sewn from old blankets. The Americans will watch. Some will probably cry. They're sentimental like that. And we will stand on that makeshift stage, well-fed and warm, and pretend to be something we're not anymore. We will pretend we're still the men who arrived here in May, but we're not. Those men died somewhere between the first meal and the last. They died of abundance. What's left are ghosts who've learned to stop fearing tomorrow. Spring 1945. The war in Europe ends. Camp Algona begins processing repatriations. Carl Weiss stands in line for his exit interview, his duffel bag containing 2 years' worth of letters, a completed English grammar textbook, and nothing else. No hidden food, no emergency rations. He has learned, finally, to travel light. Captain Anderson conducts the final interview personally. Sergeant Weiss, your ship leaves in 2 weeks. You'll return to Hamburg. Any concerns? Carl considers the question. Sir, what happens when we go back? When we see what's left? Anderson leans back in his chair. You'll remember what you learned here. You'll remember that cities can be rebuilt, that systems can be fixed, that abundance isn't a miracle. It's a choice. And if they don't believe us, then you show them you build it anyway.